Hi, welcome to the Wise Owl Knits podcast. Thanks for watching today. Today I'm going to go a little bit in a different direction that I have been because I want to talk about my design process. I am, as you probably know, leaving my day job at the end of June, so I've been doing a lot of thinking about how I design and if I'm doing things the most efficient way possible. Probably I'm not, but I'm trying to work out processes to make that better. So I'll talk a little bit about that today. First though, I'll talk about what I'm wearing, which is my Flutterbutt shirt. One of those things that somebody else designed that I knit. That doesn't happen very often. So this was for a knit along with Knitty McPurley and Arkansas Yarn Co. And the knit along ended on the day before Easter, which is April 19th. And I got mine done probably about a week before that, but the pictures taken just a few days before that. So it was a fun knit. It's by Jessie Made Designs, and I made a few adjustments. I made it a little bit longer to fit my body and to look appropriate for my age. So I really enjoyed the pattern. I wasn't sure if I would wear it much, but I do really like it, so I probably will wear it a lot this summer. It is a bit not transparent, but you can see through it a bit. So I've got a V-neck shell that's silk that I'm wearing underneath it, and I'll probably wear those two together most of the time. You can't really tell that I'm wearing it other than it's a bit darker under the Flutterbutt shirt, and you can see it if you're really looking, but probably most people will not even notice. I'm also wearing the Virgin Cow, which is a new design that I have out. I'm going to talk about that a little more during my discussion of how I design, but I've done this cowl in 3 different versions. This version is using a set of mini skeins that was from Sweet Mountain Crafts that I got last summer, and it's their Let's Go Camping set. So my Virgin Cowl, I really like this one. It's very cheery. I like really all the versions that I did, but right now I'd say this is my favorite. So anyway, to talk about my design process, I'm going to just start at the very beginning, which is inspiration. When I first started designing, and I was doing a lot for magazines, when you get a design accepted, they send you you either knit the design, or you draw a picture of it and send it into the magazines, maybe knit a swatch on a yarn you like. If they accept the design, they will send you yarn to knit it in, which may be totally different than what you had in mind. And they also, so you have to knit the sample, you have to write the pattern, and then you submit that into them. And one thing they always ask you to do is write a little paragraph about your inspiration. And because they almost always would use a different yarn than I had used, and almost always a different color than I had used, it made a little difference in the inspiration. And I always felt like they were looking for some thunderbolt lightning strike that was like, oh my gosh, this idea, I've had this idea and I have to knit it. And or you were on a mountaintop and you saw the beautiful vistas, and that brought this design to the forefront in your mind. And I always felt like they were asking for more than I really had. And a lot of times my inspiration comes from really little things, like, maybe something like a texture that I'd seen in the sand on a trip, or waves, and just patterns of things that you see in nature. I love wildflowers, and I do get some inspiration from wildflowers, but I always felt like that was a little inadequate for what they were asking for. And that's one of the reasons that I stopped designing for magazines. Another is that they had such a long time period from the time that you submitted the design, knit it and sent it in, then usually it would be at least a year later before it was in print. By that time you totally forgot all about it, and you didn't get paid until it actually got printed. So they could accept your design, they could send you the yarn to do it, you could get it all written up and sent in to them, and maybe through no fault of the designer, they just had a change in how they were going to do that particular issue. It may not get published. I never had that happen to me, but they always made it very clear that that was a possibility. So I did that for several years. It's a pretty low acceptance rate per times that you send in ideas. Like maybe 1 in every 10 would get accepted. So you were doing a lot of work preparing for things that may never come to fruition. Now you could do other things with those designs. You could send them into a different magazine or a yarn company, or you could self-publish, but it took a while to figure that out, whether that was something that you wanted to do. They also usually had themes that each issue would have, so you design something for that theme that may not have been anything that you were particularly interested in anyway, so that was always a bit of a challenge. So coming up with inspiration to fit what they wanted was not something that I really enjoyed after a couple of years of doing it, because it just didn't seem very productive or a very good use of my time. Now, when I was just started and I was working full-time and it was just a fun little side hustle, it was kind of exciting. It's fun to see your name in print when that happens. So I'm not sorry that I did it, but in the long term, it wasn't a good fit for me. I come up with inspiration now for my self-published designs in a lot of different ways, and some of those ways are just really, really simple. I am working on a design now that is raglan shaping, and I just hadn't really done that before in my design work. I think I did 1 or 2 designs for Cascade yarns that were raglan shaping, but other than that, I really hadn't worked with that style of sweater very much. So I wanted to do that, and so that was part of my inspiration for a sweater that I'm working on now, which is the beads tee. And part of the inspiration for this was also some really pretty yarn that I found that was at the Arkansas Yarn Co. booth right next to me at the Knitting McPurley retreat when we were both vending. So I did this raglan shaping on this t-shirt, and I used a slip stitch pattern. The slip stitch or mosaic knitting I chose to do because I had a knitter that lived in the South that had contacted me and said, "Oh, I really like your colorwork sweaters, but even in fingering weight, they're just too hot to wear where I live. Have you ever considered doing a slip stitch colorwork design rather than stranded colorwork?" and I really had worked a little bit with slip stitch on some accessories when I first started knitting, but I just hadn't done that much. So the combination of the wanting to do a shaping that I didn't have a lot of experience in, combined with some really beautiful yarn, and remembering this comment that I had gotten from a knitter a couple months ago, all went into the inspiration for this design. So that works for me. I wouldn't think that was super exciting for a magazine to publish. Sometimes it is just the yarn that I see. I may have a special skein that reminds me of something, and build a design off of that. Oftentimes it's things that I see out in the wild. I'll be sitting, this is the one thing I almost always have to confess when I go to confession. I sit in Mass, and rather than paying attention to the readings or the homily, I am looking at other people's clothing, other women's clothing, particularly, sometimes men, but usually women's clothing, and looking at the sleeve shaping, or looking at the color work design, or looking at the cables, and thinking about, maybe I could tweak this a little bit and go off on a tangent on that, and maybe that would be a good design. So that happens to me way too often. That probably is the place where I'm with the most amount of people at the same time in a situation where people are sitting still. So it kind of lends itself to that, but I am trying to stop that habit. It just seems to happen over and over again. Rarely is there a lightning bolt that comes down and strikes near me, and just I have this brilliant idea in my head and go with it. More often it's just little things that I see that make me think this might be a good design, and then from then I go to sometimes straight to knitting if it's an accessory. If it is a garment that I'm going to wear, then my next step would be a spreadsheet to at least work out stitch counts for my size. So a lot of times I'll pull out a spreadsheet for a past sweater and kind of do some swatching, figure out an approximate gauge, and start knitting based on numbers for the shaping that I want. And I'll go into that in way more detail on a future episode, because it gets pretty math intensive. But once you have some basic spreadsheets worked out, it's fairly easy to go from one design to another. Now there's so many variables, starting with stitch gauge and row gauge, but there are a lot of other variables too. Do you want negative ease, positive ease? Do you need to do some kind of a neck shaping because you have a V-neck? And maybe the spreadsheet that I started off with was for a crew neck sweater. So there are always things that you have to change. So anyway, we'll move on to the spreadsheets and working out the numbers next time. But just a little bit more talk about inspiration, with starting off here with the Virgin Cow. When I was at the Knitting McPurley retreat, there was a knitter, I think it's Knitting Wanderer, Amy, who was wearing the Juniper Cow. And it's a crochet cow, and it just draped really nicely as she was wearing it, and she did hers with a mini skein set, and I kind of just, used some things that I had in my stash, but I really, really like the way this cowl laid. I have not ever written a crochet pattern, and I may do that someday, but for right now I'm sticking to knitting. But the shape and the lace pattern on the Virgin cowl was really inspired by the Juniper cowl. Now the Juniper cowl is much larger, but the same basic shaping applies. Like, it starts off narrower around the neck, and then burgeons or gets larger, blooms toward the end. So this is one that I did in a sock set from Arkansas Yarn Co. This is the second Virgin cowl that I did. And they look nice when you just look at them and you're not wearing them, but I think they really come to life when you're wearing them. And they're light enough, you can wear it in the summer. This was my first sample, and this is a yarn from You and I that I'd had for a long time, and she's not dying anymore. I knew I only had the one skein, so I thought that would be perfect for this sample. So that pattern and that design was inspired by what somebody else was wearing, and a pattern that I crocheted after I saw it on someone else. The bead tee I talked a little bit about, so the inspiration for that was a combination of the yarn that I saw, the desire to do raglan shaping, and the comment from a viewer saying that she really wanted something in mosaic or slip stitch knitting. Now, after I did the first one, I was looking at some other yarn that I had that was a mini set that all the attendees of the Knitting McPurley retreat got. So this is a second version of the bead tee. The main color is from Leading Men Fiber Arts, and I had taken the mini set to the Green Castle Wool Show, and Leading Men Fiber Arts were vending there, so I said, I've got this set of mini skeins and I want to do a t-shirt and use the mini skeins as the color work, and just looked at what they had. I knew that I wanted something with a good contrast so that you could see the mini skeins. It was Lent, and every year at Lent I'm like, I don't really have anything that's purple, and so the purple fit the bill for Lent, and it also provided really nice contrast with the mini skeins from Knitting McPurley. So the second version is here. It has 7 sets or 7 repeats of the bead motif, where the first one only had 5, and I think I like the 7 better, but it kind of depends on which size you're making, how many you can do. I think on the smallest size, most you would be able to do is 6. This is the second to the smallest size, and I could do 7. On the larger sizes, you might be up to 8 or 9 repeats before you split for the sleeves, because I prefer most of the time to end the color work before I split for the sleeves. And sometimes I put color work down at the bottom, like I did that on the bead tee, and I'm sure I will do that on this sample too, and around the sleeves. But see, if you put it around the sleeves and you have more repeats here, you don't have that nice swatch of the main color there to provide like a break for your eyes. So that's just a little bit about the inspiration on the bead tee. I am going to do another raglan, and that's using this yarn from Chicken Lady Fiber Arts, and the color is Scarlet. It is a DK weight yarn, and again, my inspiration was mostly that I wanted to do a raglan sweater, and I want to do something that is, this one will not be color work, but it may have either a bit of cabling or a bit of brioche. And so I'm still working out the details and pondering that in my mind as I gaze on this beautiful color. So that inspiration is yet to come, or it's not necessarily yet to come. It is ongoing. It is just percolating in there, and I'm trying to figure out exactly what I'm going to do. Another work in progress, another design in progress that I finished the knitting on is my doodle sweater, and this was color work in the rand with long sleeves, little sewing in of ends yet to do. Thought I finished that the other night, but I guess I missed one. So this sweater I took a bit of a pause on. One, because it's long sleeves, it's DK weight. I'm not going to be wearing this anytime soon, but I've got the knitting done and I've got the basic spreadsheet done. I need to work on the charts for the doodles pattern, and I've got charts done. Sometimes when I do charts, if I am going to be away from my computer, I do them on my iPad. There's a program, let's see what it's called. It's a charting. Boy, I thought I would just go right to it, and I am not. Oh, it's called Knitting Charts. So, you probably can't see this too well, but this is a chart that I did on there, and I can do this in the car, on the go, and then later on I will take that message off. I will switch this chart to Adobe Illustrator. I'm not super proficient in Illustrator, other than I can do some really great knitting charts in it. And the difference between this and Illustrator is Illustrator, you can export great pictures that work well in print later on, where this would come out a little fuzzy. It would work, it's just not as advanced. It also, with Illustrator, you can make the chart in the exact shape of the design. In knitting charts, the chart would have to be as wide as the widest point in the design the whole time, so you have some extra grid work there that is not going to have any stitches in it, and I don't like that as well when it's in a pattern. But it is very handy as to just playing around with things. It's good to use when you're on a car ride, if you're just sitting there in front of the TV and you don't want to have your whole computer out, and it's nice and convenient for the initial design work. So that is the Doodles Cal. The inspiration for this was just playing around with chart work, and I had told Holly that from Mystery Mouse Yarns that this main color was something that I was looking for a DK colorwork sweater, and I wanted something contrasting to go with that. And I said, use your great color sense to come up with something, and she came up with something that I love that I never ever would have chosen myself. So the yarn that she chose kind of led me in the direction that I went for the colorwork pattern for this sweater. So that was my, I guess, design inspiration for the Doodles sweater. The last one that I'm working on right now, and it is already to the testing phase. You've seen this one before. This is the Fraser Fur. And it is, Fraser Fur is always the kind of Christmas tree that we buy. So my favorite Christmas tree. And I wanted something that was just a basic sweater with no color work, but some texture. And I wanted to use some of my Skeins Southlander, which is one of my favorite yarns. It's a really rustic yarn. This is the bulky version. This is the DK version. And there's not a huge difference. Their DK version is exactly the same weight as Cascade 220. So to give you an idea that different countries, different mills name things differently. So you can't just go by the name of a yarn or the description of a yarn weight to know how it's going to work in different designs. I would for sure do this in Cascade 220. I would not hesitate to do that. So this one was just an idea I had based on something that I liked, the Christmas trees, the Fraser Furs, and based on wanting to use a particular yarn that I really love. So that is how we came up with the Fraser Fur sweater. Next time we talk, I'll go into spreadsheets a little bit and then just continue on in how I design. Hopefully, as I go through this process, I can develop some ideas or some processes to make the whole thing a little bit smoother and quicker. The one thing that I can't do any quicker is the knitting part. And I am sure that the big name designers have people that knit their samples for them, but I am definitely not at that point in my design career that I can do that. I did it one time. It didn't really, the person that knit my sample did a fantastic job, and that part of it was no problem. I sent her the yarn to use. She knit it up. She may have done things slightly different than me, but they weren't at all wrong. So I didn't have a problem with somebody else doing it and not doing it exactly the way that I would do, but it just financially wasn't viable for me to do. So I tried it once. It didn't really pay off like I thought it might, but it was good to try. Maybe sometime in the future that will change, but for right now it's not going to be something that I will do on a regular basis. So, moving on, I still have some of my Delightful Works bags in the shop. So I've got these medium drawstring bags. This one has these pretty owls on it and Thistle. It's got a nice peach inside and a squared bottom. Then I've got the Owl Gathering bag. Same shape and same medium drawstring bag with a squared bottom and beautiful interior. So those are both in the shop. Also a little pouch, and there is a combo of the two of these in the Jeannie the Owl pattern. So if you're in the market for both of those, you can get those and get a pattern with it too. So we've got those. Where'd I put those? I'll put them right in there. I do have, this is my 49th episode of the Wise Owl Knits podcast. So next week, it probably won't be next week. Next time I record, I will have a winner for the Owl bucket bag, which is also from Susan at Delightful Works. So to win this bag, you need to make a comment on the YouTube, and you'll be entered into the drawing. If you make a purchase from my shop, you get 2 additional entries in the drawing. So if you're in the market for something, a pattern or one of the bags, you might as well do it now, and then maybe you'll win a free bag. So that will be coming up the next time I record, hopefully in about 2 weeks. Thanks again for watching. I hope you found the little design inspiration interesting. It's kind of interesting to me what sparks different designs. You know, ideas just come, and it's usually not, like I said, some big dramatic moment that happens that puts the idea in your head. A lot of times it's just, you're out there living your life, you see something, you think about the different clothing that you see people wearing and how you could adapt that to knitting, and you go from there. Thanks so much for watching. I hope to see y'all soon. Bye.